Ba-ba-ba. All right, welcome everyone to the second call of the digital economics cohort. I hope you guys are all enjoying it so far. I have a few things I want to go over. Of course, for those that are just joining in, feel free to leave questions either in the chat or in that Discord thread, and we can run through those after this. And I'm sure questions will come up along the way, so don't hesitate to leave them. And yes, so the first thing I want to talk about, because there is a lot of there's so much to content creation that it's hard to cover all of the nuances, right? Because I feel like a lot of people at the start, it's like I don't know what to write because it's you haven't written so much to the point where you understand that it's like a very long-term thing. It your ideas stack and they develop over time. So that first tweet that may not be very good can be turned into a tweet that is very good once you make those subtle connections that can't really be taught in a course, right? As with many things, experience is one of the best teachers in this game. So, the first thing I want to talk about, and I feel like a lot of people could get tripped up on, is as a beginner, what kind of content to focus on. And the biggest thing here is growth, right? Because if you aren't focused on growing to 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, however many followers, it's going to be hard. It's going to discourage you because you're going to be writing all of this fire content and not getting many eyes on it. And you're like, why this content is good? Why are people not engaging with it or whatever? Like I'm tweeting like this other account and theirs is doing super well, but mine's not. So there's a few nuances there. And the first thing I want to paint this picture with, let's say, a YouTuber, right? So let's say you watch a YouTuber. I'll use How to Beast as an example. He has like 1 million subscribers now, but you go back to his first videos, and you can do this on YouTube or really anything if you know how to like search the platform. But you could go to his account, you can go back to his very first videos, and then you can start to see what is actually creating the growth, right? Because the big accounts that you see on Twitter, while they may have great ideas that you can kind of swipe for yourself, but they automatically get engagement. They automatically get views. People know their name. There's a lot of other things over time that results in engagement, right? It's not only the tweet at that point, it's the relationship that the person has with the brand that causes engagement. I could write something. I won't use myself. I don't like using myself as an example, but How to Beast could post a video on anything, literally anything, and it would get a specific amount of engagement, like pretty good engagement, just because he's built that authority and like brand over time. So as a beginner, you have to focus on growth. You have to play the engagement game. And that doesn't necessarily mean being a robot and just saying the same things all the time. It means you have to pay very close attention to what gets engagement. So in that section in this module that goes over attention and engagement psychology, that has to become a very big thing where you're either writing these, what could seem, depending on how long you've been on Twitter, what could seem like a cringe and basic thread to you, that may be what you need to write in order to blow past 1,000, 2,000 followers. And then you can start to work in other things that you think are a good idea, but other people may not see that yet because they're just not indoctrinated to your entire worldview yet. And so that's the main thing is, and why I stress the domain of mastery mainly is because it helps you focus your content down to something that can be engageable. It gives you topic ideas to research, but then when you come and look at the tweet formats that I've put in the other modules, which are like the hook examples, the thread examples, the tweet examples, even the swipe file in the command center, I would try and practice, use that kind of as like training wheels for now to learn how things are structured. And the second trap that can happen here is really not taking your own message seriously and not thinking, or it really depends on the tone or voice you're trying to get across. But a lot of people, they don't take their own message seriously, and so they kind of joke around rather than just putting the advice out there in a way that is insightful. It delivers value. It's you can try and develop your own voice to be insightful or have the tone that you are aiming for that will impact more people, right? There's a reason that we are so attracted to the quotes and the way things are written. It's because it's good writing and people are taking the message that they want to spread seriously. And so that there leads to yet another trap, which could be trying to be too clever, especially at the start. Like if you're trying to be too clever with what you're saying rather than just getting the point across in a straightforward and impactful way, that will change quite a bit for you. So right now, in the beginner phase, if you're in the beginner phase, the main focus should be really paying attention and taking time to kind of craft your tweets, right? Write them out, and then you can come back and edit them at another time. That brings up, Joey, do you want to share your method that has changed the lives of many, including our own JK Molina, the expert tweet writer?
Yeah, so JK is definitely my favorite example of this, the ghostwriter, for those who don't know. So, long story short, essentially, we're better at doing different types of work, convergent or divergent tasks at different times of day. More importantly, depending on how energetic and how focused we are. So, say you're a morning person, you're going to be more energetic and more focused early in the day. Makes sense, right? But you're going to be better during that time at linear tasks, what are called convergent tasks. So that could be editing, implementing, doing mathematics, programming, stuff like that. Then later on in the day, when you're less energetic and you're having a harder time focusing, you're better at divergent thinking and divergent work. So that's when you're better at brainstorming, maybe researching, drafting things. And so what you can do is you can use that to start getting in a cycle of drafting and brainstorming later in the day if you're a morning person, and then coming back in the morning, the next morning, and editing the stuff that you wrote. So that has a twofold benefit. One, it harnesses the way your brain works. And so you're making use of those two different periods of the day and two different, the ways that your brain's using its networks. But also by coming back and taking a second look at something, that also helps improve the quality of your content.
100%. I kind of did this unintentionally at the start. This, I know Joey's the productivity guy, and I'm pretty big on self improvement. So take this with a grain of salt, but it may be worth trying out. Bad advice here, but what I would do when I was first starting out is like I didn't know what to write. I didn't really have a structured writing schedule. So at night, I'd lay in bed staring at my phone, soaking in the blue light. But that's when ideas would come to me like nothing. It's like I would read something on Medium and then I just had ideas flowing. And so I would write the tweets there in my phone before I go to bed because my mind is just like super creative at that time. And then I would come back in the morning when it's time to actually schedule or post these things. Then I would edit it to kind of play that engagement game that we talked about earlier and kind of apply the principles and the lessons from what we're learning in digital economics to it. And then you can edit everything and polish it up and then send it. So the next thing is the entire notion that I feel like it seems like this is the biggest sticking point in the Discord when we're having these discussions because the whole concept of a niche has been drilled into people's heads. It's really been conditioned into people's heads. And I'm not saying when I say niche, I'm talking about like how online business people define niche, where it's like you need to choose one thing to talk about and you only talk about that one thing. And I just don't really see it like that. It doesn't really make sense to me because I feel like that's coming from people with a freelancer background because I used to say this stuff with a freelancer background, but that's mainly for like direct outreach, like posting helpful content. It's like if you were doing the whole Facebook marketing thing a while back, it's like, yes, your bio should be, I help this person do this. And that's really it. That's your USP, your unique selling proposition. And then you would post content, like authoritative content, every now and then, just so when people look at your profile, they see that you know what you're talking about. But I like to think of it on a much longer term and like all encompassing approach here, so you can incorporate the things you like. It's the whole domain of mastery thing, and using those interests to give you ideas that you can then plug into the templates however you'd like, or the tweet structures, or even the long form writing framework however you'd like. So that's the main thing that I do, is I study these interest areas. So let's just say spirituality is one of mine, right? But my main one, and kind of I guess my niche, or the thing that would make money, would be, let's say, content creation, right? So I go and I study spirituality, and I already have a pretty big knowledge and understanding of content creation. Now when I'm studying spirituality, those are more so for like different angles and ideas and examples for talking about content creation, right? So I'm knocking out two birds with one stone. I am passionate about what I'm learning. I can bring that energy to the content I'm creating, and I can also still establish authority because I'm bringing a unique perspective to the thing that I want to build authority in, right? So let's say I read about spirituality and I read this example of like breathing and how you can get out of your head. And so that's a like that can apply to content creation a lot, especially what we're talking about now. It's very easy to get caught in your head and end up with a tweet that you're not happy with and just go over and over again until you could create a unique perspective around content creation with that. And so that leads into what I wanted to talk about with the APAG writing framework, right? Because that's a bit iffy in this module, where I have like the long form outline, it makes sense. But with long form writing, which we'll learn more about in the next module, when you're researching or you're generating ideas or you're just consuming literally anything, you're looking for examples, anecdotes, stories, other things that catch your attention, for the sake of including those to bring a new perspective to what you're actually talking about. So I'm trying to think of an example today. Let's say like my newsletter is going out right now. I have that pulled up. Let's see. So I read about it's more so like making connections with this. So I've read Ken Wilber's work quite a bit, and he talks about developmental stages, where there are states and stages. States are temporary, stages are kind of permanent, where you can reach a state of creativity with your content creation, right? But a stage where you've developed yourself to the point of where like a set quality of content is there, like you write a set quality of content that will get a specific amount of engagement. You've reached a new baseline, whatever that may be. And so I take that, because he's talking about like life as a whole, and I can take that and kind of start to create this story and this perspective that helps people understand content creation more, right? The example I just used, where you can have that burst of creativity or that burst of productivity, but have you developed that creativity or that productivity to a point of sustaining that, right? And so that gives me a very unique perspective, instead of just going over the basics of content creation over and over and over again, because that's in essence what I'm doing. I'm just using the things that I'm consuming on a daily basis, whatever it may be, to bring stories, examples, metaphors, other things that I'm noting down, so then I can use that as a unique perspective. And you'd be surprised, like once you try to do this, it's pretty surprising like how many things you can connect, and how you can just like create a story out of really anything you're consuming. Seriously, if you watch like a fitness vlog and something sticks out in your head from a story they told, you can usually use that same story to explain something that you're talking about in that specific article. And as I said, this will make more sense later on. But one more thing I want to give in relation to the APAG framework. So if you haven't gone through that section yet, the APAG framework is a writing structure. It's like Ada or Pastor or other copywriting frameworks that people recommend. So it's attention, perspective, advantage, and gamify. And so you catch attention with the hook, and then the perspective part can be really short. The main thing there is you're trying to you're just explaining the problem, right? You're giving the common perspective on whatever topic you are talking about. And then the advantage part of that framework, where you're presenting an argument for overcoming that problem or viewing it in a different lens, or just steps to achieving whatever topic you're talking about, that can be really long. Like the advantage part usually takes up most of my content. So you think of it in terms of a thread where attention is the hook. And then perspective could be like one tweet going over the general problem that happens relating to the topic that you're writing about. And then advantage is like the steps. So 7 ways to increase your productivity. And that's the majority of the article, is the argument you're trying to present. But the perspective aspect, so that very first tweet is kind of like how you're going to present that argument and why you're presenting it that way. And so over time, and using this quite a bit, and with module 3 that will be released, you can start to really talk about the same thing over and over, but you're just using different examples and stories and anecdotes to explain that to people. Like I would, if you have the time, I would encourage you to go through like the past like 4 of my newsletters. They're all saying the same thing. Like the end goal is all the same. It's really saying the same thing with like hierarchy of goals, vision, this, that, and other. I'm just using what I'm consuming to help solidify that knowledge and pretty much talk about the same thing, just under a different lens, right? And so then the last part of that framework, gamify, pretty much means give clarity. So leave them with actionable advice. Summarize everything in steps. So at the end of threads, you always see to recap, and then you list out the points that you talked about, and then you give them a call to action. So you gamify it in a sense where you're having them do something. You're giving them clarity on what to do next, whether that be a call to action or even just a challenge where it's like, go out and do this stuff. You know, you're wrapping it all up in a way that hopefully makes it easy for them to implement what you're doing. And so the last point that I wanted to touch on, because I've seen this a few times, because even though I can't engage like a crazy amount on social media just because time suck, but I'm still keeping my eye on a lot of you in silence. And there's like, when you write threads, the hook is the most important thing. It is the most important thing, or else nothing else is going to get read, right? So my advice is, one, come up with a topic idea. You can write a hook if you want, like a first iteration of a hook, just so you have something to write about. But once you finish the thread, read through the thread. You want to note what the big idea was, so what you're trying to help them achieve. You're noting what one of the big problems could be. You're noting what some of the big benefits could be, like what's in it for them when they read that thread. And then you have some firepower that you can kind of manipulate into an attention grabbing hook that kind of summarizes everything and also hints at what is to come. And so with that, and when you are studying threads or you're reading through threads and you see a viral thread and you're like, okay, why in the world did this go viral? You read through it, and I guarantee, read through the thread and then read the hook again, and you're like, oh, okay, the hook was really good, but it also delivered 100% on what it said. And then they have the gamify aspect at the end where they're like, go here, retweet the tweet, and there's a bunch of strategies with that. This is just off the top of my head before we get into questions, but I've seen people do this well. If you know a thread is just going to do absolutely well, at the end, you can like promise something. So let's say you wrote up your no, let's say you have like a product or something of value, right? You can offer that in somewhat of a giveaway where at the end you're like, if you retweet this thread, I'm entering everyone that retweets this thread into a giveaway for this. And then that's literally it. And you will get a lot of retweets on that because it's low friction. It's like, yeah, that's a no brainer. Of course, I'll retweet the thread. Why not? And so it's little things like that where you can just um, like have fun with it, first off. And second, like use it to your advantage where you're coming up with creative ways to spread your content further so it gets in front of more people's eyes. Anything on that, Joey?
Yeah, I have a couple quick things. One, I would so a big part of the headlines or the first tweet, the hook for the thread is curiosity, right? You want to stop people from scrolling and make them go, this sounds interesting. I want to learn more about this. So I want to open it and I want to read it. Same thing goes for your blog articles and your newsletters and everything that you create, right? So think about what or how you can phrase your big idea in a way that instills curiosity in people. And then the other thing I was going to say is think about the blogs you read, the email newsletters you follow, the people on Twitter or LinkedIn that you follow, the YouTube videos that you watch, and think a little about what is it about that content that stops you? Aside from, oh, hey, I like following Dan Coe and I'm going to read everything that he posts, think about what else. Like if you're scrolling on, the YouTube homepage and you see an interesting video, what was it about that made you stop and click on it and read it? And try to distill what it is, like what patterns there are to that. And then you can start leveraging those kinds of patterns in your own hooks. And I know some people, this can quickly kind of devolve into being like BuzzFeed, right? If anybody remembers BuzzFeed, where it's like all of their headlines were clickbaity. Well, clickbait isn't necessarily a bad word. Clickbait is only bad, in my opinion. Clickbait is only bad if you don't deliver what you said you were going to deliver. If you promise something in your headline and you actually deliver upon it, then you did what you said you were going to do. So you did the reader a favor by stopping them and getting them to read your content. So don't be afraid to be a little clickbaity as long as you're actually delivering upon what you say that you're going to.
Yes. I'm sorry if there's any noise. People, whenever I get on a call, people just decide to like throw refrigerators down the stairs or something. I have no idea what's going on. My room is shaking. But yes, okay. One thing. So, Minjay, you asked, is there a checklist anywhere for the headlines? Not really. The one thing I would recommend is in the actual like outline for, let's say, the newsletter, the long form outline that you can use. Um, there's the place where you list out the problems, you list out the benefits, you list out the objections, you list out personal experiences, and from that you can take the most compelling aspects of that. Like what are the most attention grabbing aspects? Um, what if the problem is like very broad or very applicable to everyone, then you can use that. If the benefit is very quick and kind of simple to execute on, you can use that. And it's kind of just like you're piecing together these like concepts. I don't know what you call it, the problems, benefits, whatever it may be, into a compelling hook, so you can lead them into discovering what that is. So in a sense, that's kind of the checklist, but I try to stay as far, like checklists are great in order to get into the habit and like understand what's going on, but overall I feel like checklists, it puts you in a same box as other people that are using the checklist. So I would recommend researching and using them, but over time you'll get used to like, okay, yeah, this needs to go in the hook. This is a compelling part of this thread. It needs to go up here. Here's how I'm going to craft it in order for them to click and go through.
One
So,
little psychological thing I'll add on to that is numbers are really good, especially specific numbers. So, for
yes.
example, if I was writing a thread about how I gained my following over the past 2.5 years on Twitter, I wouldn't just say how I gained 50K followers in the past 2.5 years. I would say how I built a following of 52,251 people over maybe a certain period of time. This is good for money. It's good for number of sales. So try not to round. If you can, get specific because those stand out a little bit more. And they're
Yeah.
also kind of more believable as well.
100%. And one thing with this is like you again, you can get creative with this. If you know that numbers do well in a headline, I one LinkedIn post that I did that did pretty well was my hook was like you don't need 326,572 followers in order to do XYZ, right? So I'm just creating stuff that makes sense, but I'm leveraging like the attention grabbing numbers in that way. So that's another thing. It's like you don't have to use something that is actually tangible, or I mean, not tangible, but like real and that you've done. You can use examples, metaphors, um, potential stories, and other things that would allow you to leverage those attention grabbing things like those numbers or other things that have been mentioned in uh, the cohort itself. And so getting on to the first question from Josh. How can I get more eyes on my tweets? Do you DM them to people like you would a thread? Yes. So the main way, tweets you don't really DM those to people. You can, right? But the main way is either just by using other methods to grow your audience. So whether it be engaging with other people or um, like networking with other people and sending each other tweets to share every now and then in the engagement group style things. Um, of course, like paid promotions are an option if you want to go that route. Uh, what was the other thing? There's also like the other strategy in the first module where it's like the forbidden strategy for growth, which it works, but that's up to your personal discretion to use. So getting more eyes on your tweets is a matter of shareability when you have an audience or when you have a set amount of engagement, right? So going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this call is you have to play the engagement game. Like a lot of the time, if you're writing these like clever one-liners, but your audience has no idea who you are and they haven't been exposed to like what you talk about in the first place and you haven't built up that baseline level of engagement to start, then and you're just writing those because they're good ideas, it may not get much reach because people aren't sharing it, right? And so you have to play the engagement game. You can take that same idea and structure it in a way that is much more higher engaging than a clever one liner, right? So that's why I recommend at the start, and this is also in the module, where you have those templates to go off of, or um, like you can go back and use Twitter Advanced Search to look at people's older content and see what they were actually writing when they were growing, right? Before they had an audience that just makes your growth automatic past a certain point. And so that's the main thing is writing high engaging tweets because that's also going to help people follow you, right? Because if people go to your account, it's like that, yeah, they'll look at the bio, they'll look at the profile picture, they may look at the link, they may look at your pin tweet, but then if they scroll down and they see that you're writing this content that isn't inherently engaging for someone that hasn't like developed that relationship with their audience, then they may or may not follow you because they don't care for the content that you're posting at this specific time. Um, so number two from Josh is main thing I'm struggling with is balancing Twitter and this cohort with a 9 to 5 job. My energy is drained after work and I'm slacking on the program and tweeting. So Joey will probably have some great insights for this, but my main thing is you're going to have to prioritize at one point. And I would personally prioritize, like, you don't have to post 3 tweets a day. You don't have to post 1 thread a week. You just have to focus, laser in on the highest the highest leverage things you can right now that will result in growth. So in my eyes, if you are trying to write a newsletter, drop it, because that's not going to result in growth. That's authenticity, that's relationship building with your audience that wants more. I would focus on, I don't think you're above 1,000 yet, Josh. So I would focus on one tweet a day, one high quality, just play the engagement game, try to craft a very engaging tweet once a day. Focus most of your attention on basic threads with heavy emphasis on getting the hook right. Send it in the cohort chat, send it in the critiques channel of MMHQ. I'm pretty sure you're in there. Post it. I don't know. Talk to your network, see what they think of the thread, and then use their feedback to craft a better hook. And then you can use the DM methods to send it to other people, get reach on it. You may even, like, if you know a thread is going to bang because it's fairly basic, like here, I'll show you one because Dakota was just blown away with this guy. Why do I have so many tabs open? Desktop 3?
Why do you have so many tabs open?
I don't know, man.
Triggered.
Okay, let me share. Okay, can you see my Twitter?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I can't get caught in the timeline. But Andrew Vieira. What was his name? You know him? The one Dakota was working with? There. Okay. So if you want to grow, like if you want to build that base audience, go to people's top tweets. Figure out what did extremely well for them with like Twemex or Tweet Hunter, whatever it may be. But look at this shit. It's insane. How to, so just like take this headline, don't copy it exactly. You don't need to copy the same concept, but you could use either the Scamper method or just an idea of your own to pretty much follow the framework of this thread. And it's not that long. That's maybe like 10, 15 tweets, right? Like if you have the idea at the top of your head, you could write this in 30 minutes to an hour, maybe. So 30 minutes to an hour a week for 4 weeks, and having a solid engagement strategy to get this out there will result in growth. And then you can start like incorporating more tweets and other things like that. But let's say with this one, let's go to Medium. It's always Medium or YouTube that I go to, especially at the beginning. This was all I was doing, is like I scheduled in my day, read one Medium article that caught my attention every morning, because there's something behind that. There's a reason it caught my attention specifically, and it will catch the attention of people like me who have similar interests, right? There's a bit more like levels to that in the sense of just having like-minded interests. 7 micro habits I learned building a $9,000 a month business. I mean, you could turn this into a story, really. But let's say 7 micro habits is interesting. That's a bit more attention grabbing than just habits alone. It's a bit more curiosity inducing than just habits alone. So you could write how to implement, so how to implement micro habits, because the quotes kind of help catch attention too. It's a little bit of a pattern interrupt. So how to implement micro habits. If you want to make it centered around dopamine, you could, or focus. You could choose like another subtopic for it. In the case of Medium, it's side business, but you could really do it pertaining to anything. Again, you're just applying the stories or the examples to whatever you're either trying to build authority in or whatever interest you want to talk about in your domain of mastery. So how to implement micro habits to get ahead of 99.5% of people. Like that's your thread hook, right? And then I'll just start writing it here. Why not? I'm not going to post this. So someone can take this. Not everyone just take it and run with it because that wouldn't really work. But you get what I'm saying here, where how to implement micro habits to get ahead of 99.5% of people. Um, where's the original thread? Oh, I left it. Okay. But then you still go to the actual thread itself. And you look at how it's structured, because there's more to it than the hook. Of course, the hook is very important, but there's a reason. Like, people kept reading down here until the call to action telling them to retweet the first tweet of the thread, right? Because that's also important, is getting people back up here to actually share the thread. And so he's painting a picture of the problem here, again, with the APAC framework. So you have attention, perspective, which is just painting a picture of like the perspective around a specific problem. So do you crave fast food? Do you scroll social media for hours? Do you struggle to focus on work because your brain would rather do other things? Here's how you fix those problems. And then you can follow this. So that's the introduction. And now you can get straight into whatever the micro habits are. Like, you could even structure this a bit more. How to implement 7 micro habits to get ahead of 99.5% of people. And so then you could talk about what a micro habit is here. So you're kind of painting a picture of the argument you're trying to present, right? You're giving them the context that they need to understand those 7 micro habits. And then, like, you can go on as long as you want here. So you could follow this and understand like what he's trying to get across here relating to the topic itself, and then kind of just like follow those, right? He has what we talked about. It's a tweet within a tweet. Each of these makes sense on their own and can be shared on their own, and people will share them on their own. So you're just getting a ton more eyes, because people may come down here and just retweet this one, retweet this one, retweet this one. And so now, not only, if this were only one tweet, you only get one retweet, but with a thread where all of the tweets inside of it are their own tweets structured in a high engaging way, then you're just like boosting that even more, right? And this is where it gets kind of fun, because it does take some time, effort, and creativity to fit what you're trying to say in this kind of like list style template, right? This readable template that draws people down the entire page. And so then you can get into the habits. Habit 1. And then if you don't know what kind of habits, you can come in here. You can look. It's kind of weird. Reply to all comments. It's business related, so this is very like niche, but it still works. You could talk about sleep. 3 must-do tasks. So in this essence, you would have to understand micro habits and paint a picture of them. So in this case, he's just talking about like, I'm assuming like they're just a way of structuring your habit formation, or like making them so small that it's easy, or so specific that it's easy, right? So you talk about that when you're introducing what a micro habit is. But then if you are stuck and you're like, I don't know what habit to include next, you can either come through here, you can just like look at all these, maybe swipe one and use it under the perspective or the angle that you're using for the thread itself. Or you could just Google best habits to form. Or you could reflect on your own days and think what habits of yours are unconscious that are actually helping you out. Like, what do you do that other people don't do, right? And so back to kind of full circle, when you're trying to grow at first, you want to write threads like these. So in Josh's case, 1 good high engaging tweet a day, just to practice writing that way and forming your ideas into something that's engaging. And then the next thing is getting eyes on these, right? So at the start, if you want to guarantee like this stuff, reach out to 2 people with large accounts, right? You can do the whole DM thing, it works. But if you have $50 to spare, just reach out to 2 accounts that you think would be able to spread this further. and you can ask around and see like who's actually offering this. But then you send them a DM and it's like, hey man, I'm writing a thread up. I wanted to see if like you'd be open to a business opportunity. Let's talk about it in Telegram or somewhere off platform, just so the Twitter police don't come after you. But then you ask them like, hey, how much do you charge for one retweet? They say 25, and it's like, okay, I'll buy that. And then the next guy, same thing, 25. It's like, okay, $50 for a potentially viral thread. If you got this down and you had people look at it and you spent a lot of time on it and you know it's going to hit, then you have people retweet it. And the good thing about those retweets is that with a big account, if other big accounts see it and they like it, they may like it, right? Which is just going to boost it even further. Like once you get past a certain amount of likes and more people start seeing it, it's just like even likes are good. Likes alone, where like if I, let's see. So it may show eventually, but you've seen it where it's like up here it says Dan Coe like this, right? Because even likes are just a less powerful retweet. They show up on their timeline when they like it. That's why engagement as a whole is so important, because that's how you get more eyes on your posts. So that's my recommendation. Long story short, Josh, is one tweet a day, focus on high engagement, one thread a week, going very basic, and not letting your ego convince you that the hook is too basic or too cringe, when that's just going to decrease the reach, especially at the start, because you play the engagement game. Once you get to a specific amount of followers, then it's like, okay, yeah, start incorporating my own things, start building that relationship, and then over time your growth is kind of automatic and you can post whatever you want. But then at the same time, you still have to pay attention to engagement either way. And that's why I stress the newsletter, is so you can actually write about what you like writing about without being impacted or like not being a slave to the algorithm, right? And so back to the next question from Myra. I'm feeling stuck in my LinkedIn growth, and realistically, how many times should we be posting to grow a consistent aligned following? How do you prevent from content burnout? So it's a very similar story, where if you're not getting eyes on your posts, the posts are kind of in vain. They're more so practice than anything. So your time is either better spent crafting one amazing, potentially viral post, and then making sure you have a strategy so you're getting eyes on it. And in the case of LinkedIn, shares are okay, comments are the best, right? So you can find a group of 4 or 5 people. I mean, you could even offer to pay them and they'll may deny it and just be like, no, send it to me here and I'll do it for free. But you connect with these people and you say like, hey, I'm writing up this great thread. I really think your audience would like it. I was wondering if like maybe I could, I don't know, it's always touchy saying this stuff, but like, would you be able to help me share it? I'd be willing to pay. You could say something like that, where it's like, I'd be willing to pay, but I think your audience would like it. And they may ask for a payment, or they'll just be like, no, I'll share it for free. And then like you just send it to them, they comment on it, and now you're getting eyes on a potentially viral thread or post, and that's how you're getting the followers initially. And then of course you can also engage under larger accounts to start building that audience. But in terms of like how often you post at the beginning to grow, it doesn't really matter. Like you could post 5 times a day, and if you don't have many eyes on it, nothing's going to happen. If you post 1 time a day, it's the same story. So I would just stick to a consistent baseline lever moving schedule on LinkedIn, and everything else except for Twitter, I just post once a day. On LinkedIn, I don't really care. It's like I post whenever I have something that will do well, or I have an idea that will do well, or I have a really good tweet that did well, and I just post it on there. So at the start, it's like heavy growth focus, which does not necessarily imply more content. It implies more things that will get eyes on your profile, get you followers, and then you increase the content and kind of wean off of other people's audiences that you're trying to leverage. So, first question from David is how to think about analytics with regards to this niche of one concept, whether to expect different types of engagement for different types of tweets. 100%. So the ones where you're kind of like talking about your interests, there, I'll say this, there's always a way to make something more engaging. Whatever the idea is, you can form it into a tweet that will engage well. Now, there's topics that do better than others just like because they do better than others, because they apply to more people. And so you're getting a bit more broad there, which in this case of this whole domain of mastery, or this niche of one that I'm trying to paint a picture of here, that's not a bad thing when you're just starting out, because you have these followers and they're seeing your content over an extended period of time. If you ever want to switch into another interest, you just start talking about it, and you talk about it enough, and you present enough of your arguments, and you talk about enough problems that are associated with it, people will be interested in it and how it applies to their life. And of course, that's given time. It just doesn't happen with one tweet or one post. It's consecutive. It's like you're raising them up those levels of awareness over time. So in terms of the analytics, I would expect pretty big fluctuations. There's going to be some that don't do very well. That's feedback to come back and try to make that idea more engaging as a whole. And then there will be the ones that do very well, where you're going to double down on those and just have that idea in a consistent rotation in your content creation schedule, where, like, let's say one on like focus has always done well for me, and you can ask yourself a couple questions of like, do I want to include this in my brand on a longer period of time, like over time? And for me, yes, it fits in pretty well. And so I have a consistent rotation of focus related tweets, banking off the idea of the one that did very well for me at first, where it's like 4 hours of focused work a day will change your life, right? And then I can create multiple variations of that, attack it from different angles. I can go very niche on one problem. I could apply it to content creators. I could apply it to personal brands. I could apply it to something else. But then again, engagement will vary there as well, but you know the focus idea is validated. So at the start, in pertaining to analytics, I really wouldn't pay too much attention, especially if you're trying to leverage other people's audiences, because it's like you don't have enough data to go off of, I would say, until maybe 2,000 followers, right? So in that case, I would just focus on like engagement, growth, getting eyes on your profile, leveraging other people's audiences for your posts. And so number 2 from David is how to navigate the command center more effectively. Do you have a process for how your thoughts and notes move through the pipeline of the command center from the queue, but also out of one page and into projects tab, et cetera, et cetera? Yes. So this is in like the entire cohort is built around the command center. So we're understanding pieces here and there, because if I told you everything in the command center, like from 0 to 1, there'd be even more questions. And it would split your focus way more than it may be right now, where if it's presented in a way based on like experience level. So if you're just starting out and you don't have a consistent newsletter or anything else of that case, you shouldn't be focused. Like the main things you should be using is like the content inspiration, the daily execution, like the planner where you list out priority tasks, possibly the recurring tasks, not even the content flow, because long form writing wouldn't be too much of a priority at that point. The other things, but in module 3, module 4, there will be more videos on how to use it in this entire like cohesive, from idea to long form article to thread to tweets, and then all of those building on top of each other. But then there will be the nuance there of, if you don't have the time and that's just way too overwhelming, you need to cut it back and prioritize to the things that are resulting in growth. And Joey, I forgot to we've actually gone over a couple questions pertaining to like your thoughts on that and managing those priorities. Um,
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I did was I copied over one of the articles from MMHQ and I put that into the cohort chat, and that's about structuring your day. So that can really help. And another thing I wanted to say is, again, this is where content schedulers help out a lot because last summer I probably had like 25K ish followers last summer, and I got burnt out. I was still working at my career. I had clients, and I was consistently trying to create content for Twitter, and I just got burnt out, and I quit doing it because it was just too much every day. Um, I wasn't making use of Hype Fury. I don't think Tweet Hunter even existed back then. But if I had been using a scheduler like that back then, that would have taken so much pressure off of me because then I would have been able to at least write one tweet a day and schedule it. That way, my account was still going. But instead, I would just have periods where I barely posted anything at all, and that really hurt. And so then when I saw my momentum slowing down and my progress waning, that hurt my motivation further. And then it got to the point where I didn't even want to log on to the platform, right? Like I basically experienced burnout because of that. So to keep yourself and to pull yourself out of those phases, using content schedulers or at least batch writing content really helps. Taking 30 minutes to an hour each week to just write a few things each week so that you have that in your back pocket can really help. And then one other thing I want to say on that is after you've written for a while, you can go back and look at the content that you have posted that has performed well because one, that tells you that that resonates with people. But two, you can take those tweets and remix them a little bit. You can use the scamper technique that Dan's talked about a whole lot, and you can shift them around and say that same thing in a different way. Dan talked earlier about how these last few newsletters are basically saying essentially the same core thing. And so you can do the same thing with your content. You don't have to come up with brand new tweets every single day for the next 10 years. You can and you should be making use of stuff that you've talked about before. So as you figure out the stuff that you want to be part of your core content, you can reword that, and that really takes pressure off of you.
Nice. Yes. Okay. I need to get back to the questions. Oh, it's right here. Okay. So from Roman, what is the path towards monetization? Not selling services, but products. For example, right now we have a solid content strategy for follower growth, writing tweets, engaging with people, DMing, writing threads. Curious how long or what the strategy is to monetize that growth. So I'm not sure which curriculum you're in, but there's the bachelor's, which is audience growth and content, and building that content ecosystem. And then there's the master's curriculum, which is heavy full monetization because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. It can really be as simple or as difficult as you make it because right now, if you have something you want to sell, package it up and launch it. That's my advice because you're going to iterate in the future. It really, like, you can only get better once you have something to iterate on. So if you have an idea of something you want to sell, then launch a Gumroad product. Like write the ebook, film the videos, whatever it may be, package them up in Gumroad, write some copy for the landing page, and do a launch, right? But the thing there is after you do that, or while you are doing that, you're going to have to learn how to make that launch do well. You're going to have to study launch strategy. You're going to have to study direct response marketing. You're going to have to study sales page copywriting. You're going to have to study how all of these things incorporate together and like a specific thing for it. Now, if you're struggling with an idea of what to sell and you just aren't really sure, you don't have any authority in a specific space, you don't necessarily have experience in other things, then you need to practice your skill set online and continuously refine it and make it easier for yourself as problems show up. So, an example, if you struggle to write threads, right? You struggle to write threads because that's something you're doing on a daily basis and it's something that other people are doing and have problems with themselves, then focus heavily on writing amazing threads. Get good at writing threads. And then once you have a few viral threads because your methods work and you've documented the process, and maybe you have a Notion template for writing threads, maybe you have some inspiration, you have your entire thread writing process after you've gotten very good at them, then you can package that up and sell it because you have results with that. Now it's the same thing with productivity. If you want to sell a productivity system, work on how productive you are. Study everything. Read books. Immerse yourself in the environment like we do with the Domain of Mastery. You immerse yourself in that environment. You learn from mentors. You study the principles. You start to implement them in your day-to-day life. You pay attention to what is happening and like your reflection on it and what has changed, and you eventually create some form of a system that allows you specifically to be very productive, that you can form a marketing strategy around and package up and sell that information. And this applies to any area of life pertaining to what you do. So another one, and this requires you to figure things out on your own. So for example, I've been in the gym for 10 years. I've tried many different workout styles. I eventually, I knew the principles. I knew volume, frequency, training, all of this other stuff, and created my own way of lifting that I really like and I can stick to and has its own benefits that are different from the markets. So with all of this stuff, the things that you can create and monetize the best are the things that you create to solve your own problems. That's really it. And again, it's as simple or as complicated as you make it. It's a matter of solving your own problems, improving, building systems around that, packaging up the system into the form of a product, which there are multiple ways to do that. And again, you have to study and figure it out so it works the best for you. And then all of these things, like this process of gaining experience in life and solving your own problems, maybe it be writing on Twitter, maybe it be designing your own personal website, maybe it be creating graphics for Instagram, maybe it's growing on Instagram, maybe it's growing on Twitter, maybe it's anything. It really is anything, right? And then you can package that up and sell it. And you can enhance with a product specifically, because you're saying products over services, you're going to need a larger audience. I don't know what your audience is at right now, but eventually you're either going to have an absolutely amazing launch strategy. So let's say you have 500 followers. You could still have a really good launch if you write incredible threads, you pay $100 to get the thread retweeted, it plugs your offer at the bottom, and you preferably, if the product sells and you have all of that down, you have everything down except for your own audience. You write a thread, you pay people to retweet it, and preferably you make sales. And if you make an ROI, then that's endless. Then you just continuously do that and you're growing at the same time. So if you know your product sells, you know you can write threads, you know you can pay X amount of money to retweet those threads in exchange and make an ROI on that, then you just run that. And now you're both making money and you're growing your audience, and you can eventually wean off of the paid promotions if you want to, but that would be how you go about it in a very simplified nutshell. So I hope that answered everything. Number 3 from David is engaging with other accounts. Any opinion on having more than 3 mentors, like many more? 15. I find it easier to consistently engage with a list that is long and also get to have 1 to 2 in each cross section of my main pillars, small, medium, and large account. Yeah, 100%. If that works better for you, do it. I have, how many do I have? Tribe of mentors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I have 14 written down, but they're all like for different use cases, right? For the different topics that I talk about, and I'm not necessarily focused on all of them at one time. But pertaining to engagement in this context, 100%. Yeah, I would add them all to a list and engage with them frequently. In terms of idea generation, I would stick to like 2, 3 at a time, just so you're not like, you can't do that, right? You can't read 14 books at one time and expect to get anything out of them. So from Sahil, I am around 1,800 followers on Twitter, and so far I have mostly talked about no code and a little bit about my journey as a solopreneur. What should be my path forward to denichify so I can start talking about broader ideas and maximize growth? What can I do to capitalize on the audience I've built so far? I would just, if they're broader topics, I would just start talking about them, because broader means they apply to more people, meaning they apply to the people that are in your niche, right? So they just apply to more people. So it's going to be even more beneficial if you write them in an engaging way. So follow the stuff we talked about earlier and the stuff in the module. But if you're broadening, that's really it. Like, you just have to write. I guess you could do this. You could start writing the broader topics from an angle that would resonate with your current niche. So no code and journey as a solopreneur seems to be the niche in this case. So let's say you want to talk about habits. Easy. So, like, going over the same article that we looked at earlier on Medium, where it's 7 micro habits I learned building a $9,000 a month side business. You could go a tiny bit broader with this if you want to incorporate more angles. But you could say 7 micro habits I learned building or talking about no code, or even just building a solopreneur business. Or you could go a bit broader, because habits in general, habits, focus, productivity, the things that can instantly improve people's lives on a day-to-day basis will always do well in almost every niche, right? And the thing there is you could just go straight up, like, start talking about them. Like, really, just start talking about them. And the better you get at articulating those in an engaging way over time, not like, they probably will get less engagement than your normal content at first, but that's the point. You have to expose people to these interests and raise them up the levels of awareness so that they can understand how it applies to their lives, and they will start engaging with that more over time. But again, at the very start, don't broadening what you talk about does not mean diluting your message by any means. It still means you can still be very hyper focused on one niche problem relating to whatever you want to talk about without lumping it under a niche person, right? Because with niche, this is why I have such a problem with niche, is like, what are you talking about when you say niche? Are you talking about the type of people you help? Are you talking about the type of problem you solve? Are you talking about the type of work that you do? Like, what niche, right? That's my problem with it. And where it's like, if you write engaging content and you follow the principles behind writing engaging content, that's niche. Your target, there's a reason people engage with it, is because it's niche, because it's specific, and because it usually harps on specific problems or benefits that resonate with specific type of people. End rant. Back to the questions. From Luke: I have a hard time choosing my first main money-making interest. Did you struggle with this too? And do you have any tips for this? So I came into Twitter with freelance and web design experience. And that was like, that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I built a product around. But as I've said in the course many times, I rarely talked about web design. I almost never talked about web design. And that's why I'm attacking all of this from this angle, is because it's not like you have to talk about it all the time in order to monetize it. You can talk about whatever you want. And then when you know what you want to sell and you have a product idea that will do well, then you start prepping, you start priming your audience, you start getting them interested in it, right? People have the ability to adopt new interests in their lives. Their interests aren't static. You can influence them to be interested in what you are interested in. You can influence them to see the value in the product no matter where they're at, right? That's the beauty of content creation, is it's endless. It's not one marketing strategy that you launch one time to a very specific person and hope it does absolutely well. In a sense, that's what you're doing, but that's a small period of your content creation process. That's 2 weeks in the span of 5 years of your entire content creation, right? So that is so in terms of picking a money making interest, if you're struggling with it, it would depend. I would have to. We'll talk about this. I'll like tag you in the Discord itself, but we can start like bouncing back and forth because you may not think that your current main interest or the one thing that you really want to pursue is inherently monetizable. I guarantee you it is. The other thing is that you are kind of already pursuing a money making interest. Like if you are super interested in audience building, content creation, writing, design, every other skill that it takes to create a personal brand, you can monetize that. Just talk about your journey. And eventually, once you have results, let's say you hit 10,000 followers by doing it a specific way, you package up that specific way, you add a unique angle to it, and then you have a launch strategy. You talk about that concept a bit more, and you make sales with the 10,000 follower audience. And of course, you can also leverage other people's audience relating to that to add more fuel to the fire, get more traffic to your offer. So we'll talk about that. Sahil, again, you mentioned lead magnets a few times in the second module. Can you talk a bit more about that? Yes, so it's the same thing. If you are a beginner, prioritize growth, especially if you don't have much time on your hands. It's the one tweet a day, one thread a week that you put a lot of time in that has potential to help you grow. Put all of your effort on growth. A lead magnet won't necessarily help with growth, but a lead magnet will help with authority building. So if you have one thing that you know you want to build authority in, you know will make you money, then create a lead magnet going over the basics, because then at that point, you just direct people to that. It's like you still talk about whatever you want, but at the same time, and when I say whatever you want, it still implies that you're getting engagement and you're playing the game up until the point where you know what to do to continue growing. With lead magnets, those are for authority building. That's for like a primer. That's in essence how you create your own customers and make them interested in whatever you plan to sell. So let me come up with a better thing. We can talk about this more in the Discord too, because I would need some specificity about like what you want to know about lead magnets. But in essence, it's an authority building tool where let's say you're doing a product launch. You're doing a product launch. You have a product idea. You write 3 threads for 3 weeks. You're promoting the product. You're increasing people's awareness around that. You're making some sales. But now what a lead magnet does is it takes that kind of manual marketing strategy and promotion strategy and it packages it up so you can send people and educate them on whatever it is that you're trying to sell earlier or at any time, right? So you plug that and you're also you're getting newsletter subscribers so you can build relationships more there as well. But a lead magnet it has so many different use cases. It can be used just as a free guide to build a relationship with your audience. It can be used as the very first primer in your funnel before you pitch your offers to someone. It can straight up just be like, I want to understand what I'm learning more. So you try to structure out your thoughts and what you're learning in a way that makes sense to you. Therefore, it will make sense to the people that resonate with you. So there's a few different reasons for it. But so if you have the time, I would just create it, because that's another thing a lot of people get stuck on. It's like, when do I launch? When do I put this out? It's like, just do it. You can change it at any time. You can go back and edit these things. You can go back, you can create a better version at any time. And that is, you're only going to create a better version when you have the first version out, shipped, and you're getting feedback on it. So if you're questioning whether or not you should launch the lead magnet, launch it. Just do it. If it fails, oh well, make it better. Okay. Okay, so that is all the questions. Joey, were there any in the chat?
You had actually handled all of them. I copied the ones over from the chat and removed them from my notes when you had gotten them. So I think we're good.
All right, sweet. We're a little bit over time, but if does anyone have any last questions? Feel free to. I wouldn't even type it out. You can just unmute yourself and ask.
What to expect in the next module?
Yes, next module is it is the idea. It's have you taken 7 Days to Genius at all?
No.
Okay, so it's similar to that, but it's how we take it's pretty much how you take what you're consuming, like what to look out for. So the ideas, the examples, the metaphors, the stories, all of this creative firepower, and then developing those ideas into your own, and also kind of setting the foundation for a potential product. So you're taking an idea, you're fleshing that out and developing it, and that can be used as like tweet ideas. It can be used as um, newsletter ideas, really anything, which they will gain more practicality in that module. But then you take those and then you can start to formulate your own theories on them and your own ways of thinking about things, which is what ultimately separates you from the crowd. It's like Naval, how he's made the whole notion of specific knowledge pop into my head because there's so much depth behind it. So it's a matter of adding depth behind your ideas and really creating your own theories, your own concepts that people can start to tie to you and like naming things as well. So Joey has the 5I framework, which is 5 steps to helping you develop your interests. And these start to kind of be the building blocks of the majority of your content where you're piecing these things together. And like a good example would be in my case, like I've been making the graphics relating to these concepts to help people understand more and separate you from the people that are writing somewhat generic content. It gives you a very good way of standing out, and it's very structured, and it makes sense. And then there's also, on top of the theories or the concepts that we'll be creating from these ideas, uh, the you're also turning those into processes. So something that you can potentially sell, like digital economics, this entire cohort, as an example, is a result of all of the processes I've been building and documenting over time inside of my little knowledge base that I have. So it's building out a knowledge base or a second brain. But again, this you can see what I mean here, where this is my concept of a second brain. So this is my way of helping people understand it and how I implement it in my life, and hopefully you'll be able to get value out of it as well. So does that answer?
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
cool. And there's a tad more to it, but that's the main thing. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Regarding the hooks. How actually, how absurd we can go with them? Is
How
there like,
absurd?
is there like an upper limit where a potential viewer might still be like get hooked and interested into like viewing your thread, or it just like might become, oh no, it's just a clickbait, so there's no
Oh,
point.
it depends. I would have to see. I'll like tell my thoughts now. But if you have an example or if you have an idea of one you want to write, pop it in the cohort chat, and we can,
hmm
um, like we'll be able to build off of that
Yeah,
more.
it's mostly the question about the numbers game. How big of a percentage?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
In that case, it just has to make sense. Like I've seen, there's there's like a tipping point where if you were to just make the number extremely long, like people lose interest. They're like, okay, this guy, yeah, that's clickbait, or that's like he took it too far, and I kind of already lost interest. But if the number is true, it may even be the case if the number is true. I remember someone posted in Modern Mastery, one of their hooks was like um, Elon Musk. I don't think it was Elon, but it was like Elon Musk made 89,000,000, like just 9 zeros dollars, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's a little over the top. That may lose more attention than it grabs. So it's kind of a balance. Um, But I would test it. That's the other thing is if a thread fails in general, you can always rewrite it. You just use a different hook and change it up a bit, of course, like add some nuance here and there. But like if you have a foundational topic that you like talking about over and over and over again, you take all of the foundational concepts, you create a new hook, and that gives like new room to kind of shed a new perspective on those foundational concepts themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. Still like yeah, making my way across it. Like it's too much, but I like the challenge.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you when you have that thread idea, pop it in the cohort chat and we can deconstruct it if
Yeah,
you
of course.
plan on going absurd.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dan.
No problem. All right. Any last questions before we go on about our Saturdays? Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope it was helpful for those here and those listening. Again, if you have any questions either relating to what we talked about here or in the cohort itself, never hesitate to post the questions in the cohort chat. And yes, I hope you all have an incredible Saturday. It was good having you guys. And talk to you later, brother Joey.
See y'all.
Bye.
Later.